the power is working with the body the way that God made it. And that's what I think needs to come back, not just to naturopathic medicine, but to all medical training.
All medicine. Hi, welcome back to the Rethink Aging podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Cindy Libert, and this is where we explore the science and strategies and also the spiritual foundations of protecting our brains and extending our health span and flourishing in midlife and beyond. One of the themes that is important in my practice that I come back to again and again with every patient is this idea of a therapeutic order, that healing has an order to it. And if we address things in the wrong sequence, even if we do the best therapies, it can actually backfire. You can, overwhelm the system when there's, aggressive detoxification that starts too early, things like that. And so today we're talking about this powerful concept of therapeutic order, and I couldn't think of a better guest to have than Dr. Lauren Deville. She's a naturopathic physician. She's given this topic very deep thought. She is the owner of Nature Cure Family Health in Tucson, Arizona, and she's also the author of The Holistic Gut Prescription and How to Be Healthy, Body, Mind, and Spirit. And she's the host of the podcast Christian Natural Health. Welcome, Dr. Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. This I have a painful joke that I've spent, many years and a lot of dollars making myself into a naturopathic physician after going through medical school, because it just so deeply resonates with me, all the principles of naturopathy, and, everyone has a story. So I'd love to know your story. What drew you into naturopathic medicine? How have you been called to serve people in this particular way?
Sure. So the fast version of that story. So I spent quite a while trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was in and out of a ton of different grad school programs. But mostly that was because I was looking for this. I just didn't know that it existed yet. And when I first graduated, actually, that's not 100% true. When I first graduated shortly thereafter from college, I heard about it, and it was just that the road was not paved, which means you don't have, insurance doesn't send you patients. You have to build your business. And I had no interest in any of that. So that was why I was in and out of all these grad school programs trying to figure out another way to do essentially what I'm now doing. Full circle, 2 years later, I was going to an osteopathic school to inspect it because I'd heard that they had kind of a more holistic philosophy. And on the way home after that interview, I stopped off at Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. And as soon as I walked in the door, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it was very, very clear from that point forward. And it's amazing how God led me kind of kicking and screaming at the beginning. I really didn't want to go this route because it was scary. And I just didn't, at that point, I hadn't built up as much trust as I have now. Having your own business is no joke, and there's a lot to it. But I've been through enough crises now that I know this is his business. He's the one who's going to take care of it. And I have to do my part, but I can trust that he's got it. Whatever comes up, he's going to take care of it, and it's going to be okay.
Oh, so. Lauren, I can relate on such deep levels.
I'm sure you can.
To the, being in business for yourself as a clinician, there's lots of trials and tribulations. So it's a beautiful thing when we can surrender and realize that we are just being stewards of what God has given us, and that it's not all up to us.
That's so true. And a lot of times when I am preparing for the day, one of my prayers is that I will remember that I'm just a conduit, that God is the healer. And Therefore, I can relax. I don't have to be stressed because I'm just, I'm open to the wisdom. Talk to me, tell me what I need to know for this person, and I'll pray for wisdom before every person that comes in. But I don't the idea that I don't have to be the one to pull the rabbit out of the hat is such a relief.
Yes, I can relate to that. So let's get into the topic about therapeutic order. I'd love for you to explain it in simple terms for people that might not be familiar with this concept, and just maybe broader about the naturopathic approach.
Sure. So when I first started at naturopathic school, when I signed up to go, I'll say, I thought at that point that it was basically green allopathy, which is the idea of giving an herb to treat a symptom that has fewer side effects than the pharmaceutical that has a similar effect of that herb. But then when I got to my first week, we had a week intensive, and it was Dr. Jim Sensenig, who has since passed away, but he changed my life because that week I felt like I had found the Holy Grail. Everybody needed to know this. And essentially, what he described was big picture. Your body is designed to heal itself. And
Yep.
he didn't say God made it that way, but God made it that way, right? Like that's the strategy that he put in place. And because that vitalistic theory is the case, as opposed to the mechanistic theory, which is the allopathic model where something breaks and you go in with a sledgehammer and you fix whatever it is because we know best. The vitalistic principle is this concept that all living systems operate via intricate feedback mechanisms. So if you tinker over here, something's going to adjust over here in order to create that balance, to create this new set point. Therefore, everything that happens symptom-wise is the body's intelligent attempt to do the best it can under the current circumstances. It's trying to get rid of the toxic invader, whether it's a man-made toxin or whether it's an organism, an infection. It's trying to throw off that morbid encumbrance as best it possibly can. That's acute inflammation, acute infection. If it cannot do that, it creates a new set point that is diminished. It's now decided, okay, well, this is just life. We're going to have to learn to live with this. And it makes the best adjustments that it possibly can in order to handle that until such a time as the conditions become ripe for it to try again, to get rid of the infection, to get rid of the toxin, whatever it might be. That would be called a healing crisis as opposed to a disease crisis, which is where you're now encountering the new infection. So if you win the disease crisis or the healing crisis rather, then on the other side of that, you're healthier than you were before going into it. And he kind of boiled this down at that point to the concept that if you give the body the building blocks that it needs to heal itself, and then you get rid of any obstacles to cure, then within reason, healing should follow. The therapeutic order of naturopathic medicine expands on that a little bit, in the sense that sometimes that is literally all you have to do. And typically the more vital, we talk about the vitality, your body's ability to handle external stressors. The more vital you are, the less you need to do beyond that point. So for kids, generally, they're super easy in most cases. Unfortunately, now there's some rare exceptions who really have a lot going on. But most of the time, kids are super vital. Get rid of the obstacle to cure. Sometimes you don't even need to give them building blocks. They just bounce right back as long as you get them up at the toxic environment. But the longer somebody's been on the earth, the more they're going to accumulate all of these morbid encumbrances that now they've stacked up over the years. And then there's entropy. So, everything eventually is going to proceed toward chaos. So all of us are going to have more and more difficulty that way. We'll burn through our reserves. That point, now we're going to need a little bit more of a boost to the vital force. So sometimes that's usually energetic medicine. And I'll get into that a little bit more because I think a lot of Christians have they feel a little weird about energetic
Sure.
medicine, thinking that it's spiritual. I don't think it's spiritual at all. This is just giving your body a little bit of a boost in its ability to fight back, to do what it's supposed to do. And then if that's insufficient, if doing the first remove obstacle to cure, give the body the building blocks and boosting the vital force, if you still need more, then the next step after that is to essentially give tissue support so that if there's tissues that are kind of have been damaged in the process of fighting, you give them kind of the building blocks that are necessary for them to heal specifically as opposed to the global. And then beyond that, if you still have to treat the actual pathology because the body can't do it without specific treatment, you do it with nutraceuticals and you do it intelligently. You're not trying to suppress. You're trying to enable it to get to detox more efficiently or to kill off the foreign invader or whatever it might be. Beyond that is where pharmaceuticals come in. So at a certain point, you might need to treat the pathology with pharmaceuticals in order to deal with it at that point. And then the very last step is palliation. And that is where if you can't get, if healing is no longer possible for whatever reason, things have gone too far, you're making somebody as comfortable as you possibly can be. And most of the time, if somebody is super, super sensitive, you have to do things in this order. If somebody comes in and they're in acute crisis, it might be very appropriate for you to jump up the therapeutic order to dealing with the acute issue with pharmaceuticals, get them out of danger, and then you can clean up the damage later or palliate the symptom because they're miserable while you clean up the damage and you figure out why this is happening. But I think this perspective really helps to, get rid of the noise so that you can listen to the signal of what's going on with the person in front of you and you're not treating willy-nilly without a clear, coherent picture.
Music to my ears. It just makes so much sense to me. And, I think about the example from my world where I'm helping people prevent and treat cognitive decline and in particular Alzheimer's disease. It's a perfect example how conventional Western allopathic medicine, we're trying to go after the amyloid plaque, which is really the body's protective mechanism for trying to contain, whatever microbe or toxin or imbalance is there in the brain. And so that's where I think, as you mentioned, in the therapeutic order, there is a place for pharmaceuticals, but we need to start at the foundation.
Yes, exactly.
Well, tell me, I know you've mentioned that a lot of your patients are like canaries in the coal mine, and I love that metaphor. I certainly share some patients like that. What makes these patients different? How is their physiology different, and how do you approach them?
So for these people, generally there's a dysautonomia component to it as well. So there's two sides to the autonomic nervous system: fight or flight, rest and digest. So the fight or flight is sympathetic, and then rest and digest is parasympathetic. Generally, these people tend to be locked in sympathetic freeze mode. So their body is constantly running on adrenaline, and it's sending danger, danger, danger signals to the system. So it's locked down. It's not in a healing mode. So for a lot of these people, you absolutely have to send the signal that the body is safe once it is. So you have to make sure that you've gotten rid of the external trigger that got them there in the first place. So if they're in a toxic external environment, you have to get them out of there. If they're drinking water that's contaminated with heavy metals, get a filter. Get a filter for the whole house because sometimes these people can absorb stuff through their skin. If they're in a moldy environment, you got to get them out of there. If they are EMF sensitive, and I see a lot of these people who end up electromagnetic frequency sensitive, clean up the environment. You don't have to necessarily get them to move off grid, although sometimes people are so sensitive that they have to have that.
Yeah.
But at least minimize the exposures as much as possible. And then the next step is get them in an environment that is conducive to health, what you're describing too, as far as clean air, clean water, get out in sunlight, make sure that you're eating decent food the way God made it, unprocessed, so that you've got all the macronutrients and you've got the micronutrients. Get them sleeping well. Make sure that their stress management is as good as you can possibly make it under the circumstances. Make some hard choices if you have to, if you're in a toxic emotional environment. A good spiritual practice, obviously, so that all of those things are in place. And then you have to do a little bit of stimulate the vital force so that they're stimulate the vital force, but also at the same time, do a lot of the things that signal, okay, now that the environment is clean, you can calm down now, stimulate the vagus nerve, deep breathing, grounding outside, get in good sunlight, all those kinds of things in order to get things to calm down a little bit. Various different types of energetic medicine fit here. I love homeopathy. A lot of these people are really sensitive even to homeopathy, but not always. So sometimes you got to be careful with even that. But, red light therapy, sunlight is basically all of the entire spectrum. So you're going to get the red light therapy from the sun as well. Um, and then later, once you've got all of those foundations, now you can start detoxing them internally, but you have to do it like you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste, like from the bottom up. So we have to make sure they're pooping, first of all, because that's the route which everything gets out. If you're constipated, do not try to detox until that begins to move. And then you work your way backwards up to the liver. So if you think of your liver like a big trash bucket, when you're born, it's empty. And then as you go through life, it'll accumulate and you're fine as long as it's underneath that fill line. But as soon as it's full, the least little thing spills back out into the bloodstream and recirculates. And then your body's like, what's that? And then produces an antibody against it. So you trigger the liver to dump into the colon. And one of my favorite ways to do this is castor oil packs. Some of my super sensitive patients can only handle no heat, few minutes. Like we've got to go real slow, even then. And then beyond that, then we start making sure that the blood that's carrying a bunch of the junk that it's slowly able to release at the cellular level is flushing in, alternating hot and cold, constitutional hydrotherapy, which is just alternating hot and cold towels to the chest and back. But a lot of times, just for convenience sake, I'll have people do this in the shower. Just 1 minute hot, 30 seconds cold, 3 cycles, start hot and cold. Then we start flushing out the lymph so that you can get all that stuff back into the liver so that you can dump it. Dry skin brushing. There's some herbal approaches, manual lymphatic drainage. Charcoal is a really good binder that is not intracellular. It's just going to grab onto things after you've already eliminated them. As long as you're not constipated, that often is indicated at this step. And then tissue healing is also going to be part of the process here too. This is part of tissue healing because you've got to get rid of the toxins locally as well before you can get to the rest of this. So that's kind of the approach that I begin to take with those people.
Excellent. Yes, I love that you begin with getting people out of the toxic environment. And because I recommend all my patients test your water, your air, EMFs in the home, and do a pantry audit and a medicine cabinet audit and a refrigerator audit and under the kitchen sink audit at your cleaning products.
Sure.
So I love that you start there. And then I deeply appreciate that the therapeutic order, starts with the foundations of health, which I'm super passionate about. Before we move into advanced therapies, we want to get the terrain of the body tended to, the soil of the body tended to. What are some signs that someone might not be ready to move into detoxification, or that you need to start at the basics?
Yeah. Well, these are the people that are already hypersensitive. They can't walk down the cleaning aisle at the grocery store without feeling sick. Or if they're around somebody who is wearing perfume, they immediately get sick as well. Or if they're, a lot of times if they have, maybe not quite to the point of tachycardia, but if their heart rate is generally elevated at rest, this also is telling me that the autonomic nervous system thinks that it's under attack. So we need to do something about that under those circumstances. If they can't take supplements very well, or they'll tell me that there are some of those people that react very strongly. That's one of the things. A lot of the people who tend to be hypersensitive also are often, not always, but they tend to be a little hypermobile on the hypermobile end of the spectrum. So EDS and things, Ehlers-Danlos and things along those lines. That might be a decent sign. And it's not like that will necessarily go away in the process. But that at least will tell me this is the type of person who's likely to have a hard time getting rid of stuff. So those are some of the early signs that I would look at.
Well, there's so much we can delve into here in terms of brain health and cognitive decline. I know that obviously I didn't go to naturopathic school, but I have gotten to learn from some wonderful mentors. Dr. Datus Karazian, he's a PhD functional neurologist, and he has, I brought it here to show. He had a little step ladder of...
Yes, that's pretty much the therapeutic order right there.
And so I wanted, just for my own benefit, and of course for our listeners, I'd love to just get your take on each of these steps. And we don't have to go through all of them because there's 7 steps. But in terms of addressing cognitive decline, he recommends starting first to optimize fuel to the mitochondria. And of course, that, involves a lot of things with dietary shifts and getting people with metabolic flexibility. Do you incorporate this into your practice as well? Do you see people with brain health disorders and
I do, yeah.
Mhm.
As far as the mitochondria, so it's a complicated question, of course. So I've just recently started delving into the concepts that there's a series of papers in like 2015 that were on the cell danger response.
Mhm.
And you're familiar with this already?
Yes.
So I'm just learning about it.
Yeah.
And the concepts that the mitochondria are often going offline for a good reason. They're doing this to protect themselves because we're in attack mode if the environment is either still toxic or we're still sending this signal that it's toxic. So trying to give mitochondrial support at that level often is usually doesn't do a great deal. So and it also depends on where the problem is. I've found that in a lot of cases trying to give NADH, for example, or CoQ10 or a lot of those kinds of mitochondrial supports, sometimes it's a game changer. Sometimes it does nothing. And I think a lot of times it just depends on where are we at in the therapeutic order in terms of whether or not the body is able to receive this signal. Maybe it's still shut down, and instead of like in energy producing mode, we're still in battleship mode, trying to attack whatever is outside. So flipping things back to oxidative phosphorylation maybe isn't the most efficient thing to do right this second. So looking to see the overall process is, I think, important. A lot of times I'll look at lactic acid just because it's something that I can do that's relatively cheap and LabCorp will do it, like the typical labs, in order to say, is the body in using oxygen adequately in order to produce ATP, or is it building up? I mean, assuming somebody didn't just do a hard workout or something. But if it's elevated, that might indicate that the mitochondria are struggling. Now we got to figure out why. Is this because they've been poisoned, or is it because we're going offline and they're in repair mode essentially? But at the appropriate times, I do think, one of my favorite approaches for the mitochondria is actually molecular hydrogen, because that one cleans up a lot of the oxidative stress that's local, and a lot of mitochondrial damage comes from the electrons that are going in, spilling back out into the tissue and accumulating there and then damaging themselves. So if we can clean that part up, sometimes that can make a difference, as well as some of the additional supports. And red light therapy turns on the mitochondria, sends that signal that, okay, we can come back online and get back to where we need to be. Did I answer your question? I don't even
You did, and I threw you a curveball,
Right?
and I didn't mean to.
That's okay.
Really, but it was beautiful because it reminds me that even though that is step one, there is so much, foundational things to bring us to even start at step one for helping cognitive decline. Everything comes back to the foundations of health. Is your nervous system grounded? Are you breathing? Are you getting oxygen to your tissues? And are you eliminating and getting good nutrition, sleeping, all of that good stuff?
And I think like my foundational philosophy and yours is that God knew what he was doing. So
Mhm.
if some part of the cells are not responding adequately, then we figure out why. Things don't break for no reason. There's always a reason. So if the mitochondria are under functioning, the question is this an adaptive response, or is this secondary because there's something in the environment? And if we get rid of that, they'll just come back online. Or after you've gotten out of that environment, do we now need to hit a reset button because they're stuck there? And sometimes that's a different type of approach. Now, figuring out if that's the case in any individual situation is a challenge, but at least it might help to explain why certain well-chosen therapies might not work in a particular situation, because then we take a step back and say, well, hold on, what are we missing here? Because whatever the body is doing, it is intelligent relative to what is happening in the environment. We just need to then say, did we miss something that's happening in the environment?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to know your approach to that first step of environmental safety? What do you take people through a checklist or a process to evaluate their environment?
It's not a checklist, it's a
Mhm.
story. I listen to their
Mm.
story. So I always start everybody, every new patient, and I say, "Take me back to when you were completely healthy,
Yeah.
and then tell me the timeline. When did things go wrong? In what sequence?" And then when they tell me, then I say, "What happened right there? What happened right here? What happened right here?" And if they don't know, then I'll start probing and I'll say, "Did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? Did you have a leak in your house? Did you go through a divorce? Did you have a major trauma? Are you drinking well water? Was that ever checked before? Did you move into a brand new house? Did you do any renovation? There's all of these other possibilities that maybe they don't think to volunteer to me, but if they tell me when things changed, then at least I can say, all right, something shifted here. It was either the main thing or it was the tipping point that they were possibly already ready to go. And maybe there was a whole mountain of stuff that we're then going to have to deal with later. But that's where I would take it. On my new patient paperwork, I do have questions that'll say, just broad scattershot, here are some possibilities that might have been obstacles to cure, and that'll help me zero in too. But generally, I let their story guide me to figure it out.
Beautiful. And I assume that was part of your naturopathic training that you were taught to take a life timeline like that.
Mhm. It should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, not as much anymore for sure,
Mhm.
so that's something that I'm hoping the schools will come back to.
Interesting. Yes. Well, I was just lamenting the fact that, remembering back in medical school, they we were at first taught, just listen to the patient. They'll tell you what's wrong with them. But then you get out into clinical practice and especially in conventional primary care where the visits are short because of how the business model works and insurance compensating just a small amount per visit, that you don't have that opportunity to really sit and listen to the patient's story.
And I feel
And so,
so bad for the MDs because that has got
yeah,
to be incredibly frustrating. Like, there is no way you can do good medicine in 5 to
yeah.
15 minutes.
It led to one of the core woundings of my life, and I finally learned the terminology for it about 10 years ago, a moral injury. When I first read of that concept, I cried because I finally had a word, talk about burnout and just feeling disillusioned with your profession, but it was actually a soul level injury where deep down what people need, the person sitting in front of you, and especially from a Christian standpoint where we, try to operate from the golden rule
Right, right.
of treating others like we want to be treated, when they're there and they need that deep dive and
No.
have someone listen to them, and then you're just having to focus on the clock so you don't get hours behind. And so yeah, that is part of my journey and why I'm so grateful to be able to practice in this way where I do also get the opportunity to ask someone, like, let's start at preconception. Tell me what you know about your mom's pregnancy with you and how,
Right.
the delivery process and all through life. So that is a beautiful place to start.
Mhm, for sure.
Excellent. Well, I love that you brought faith into the conversation. That we can wrap up our conversation here with. I know we share a Christian perspective and worldview. I love to know how that informs your practice of medicine and how you've brought that into your own health
Yeah.
and life.
Yeah. So, as far as the practice of medicine, like, I mean, this was God's business from the very beginning. He was the one who led me to naturopathic medicine. He was the one who led me to have my own practice. He has blessed me at every turn in terms of bringing people to me. So, I'm so grateful to be able to do what I do. And I do pray before every patient, not usually
Mhm.
with them necessarily, unless they
Mhm.
want me to or unless it's appropriate. So there are a lot of times where if somebody, especially when I have somebody who is talking all over the place and they're jumping topic to topic to topic, and I can tell that there's an intense overwhelm and
Yeah.
fear, then I'll usually say, all right, let's stop and pray for wisdom before we continue the conversation. That usually takes it down a couple of notches. And I will pray for wisdom out loud with them and for peace and for all the rest of it. And then the rest of the visits pretty much always go smoothly after that. Depending on what's going on, because I advertise that I'm a Christian, most of my patients are Christians, which gives me the door where
Yeah.
now I can talk to them about what scripture says about this situation or that situation. If it's a relational issue or a spiritual issue, then I can say, here's your homework of things to review for scripture, that talk about what you're dealing with. Or I have a handout that I will give to people that is essentially a journaling prompt where you and the Holy Spirit have a Q&A to try to figure out what's the root of your negative emotions. And it's essentially I tried to take scripture and distill what I do on my own because I'm a journaler, into a tutorial for people. Or, there's some that are, one of them that I give out frequently is the Trusting in God handout, which is essentially it goes like this. You write down every time you can think of where a situation looked impossible and God came through. And then when you're done with that, everybody where the situation looked impossible and God came through. And then when you're done with that, you go through a bunch of the stories in scripture where the situation looked impossible and God came through. And then you go through the scriptures that say he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He will never change.
Yeah.
And you go through the specific promises that are relevant to what you are dealing with, and you review those as often as you need to when you start noticing that your thoughts are spiraling until you get to a place of peace. So it depends on, what the situation is in front of me. And as for my own health, I do a lot of journaling myself, prayer journaling, and I let the Holy Spirit lead me to what he wants to show me. I will often ask him for specific wisdom in my own life too. So I try to do what I tell people to do.
Beautiful. Oh, we are soul sisters,
Yeah.
Lauren. We have so much in common. Oh, goodness. Well, let's wrap up. I would love for you to share your wisdom. Say someone is dealing with complex chronic illness, maybe cognitive decline or the beginnings of that, or mental health concerns, or just chronic fatigue. How would you advise someone if just the first few steps to take to address that from a therapeutic order standpoint?
So regardless of what the diagnosis is, I will tell them to go back on their timeline to when
Mm-hmm.
they were perfectly healthy and then write down, do a timeline of your health history progression of when symptoms began to the best of your ability, ballpark if you have to, and then overlay that with a trauma timeline. And this is not necessarily emotional trauma, although that counts. It can be physical traumas as well. Big things that have happened to you. And even if they weren't big, if they seemed big to you, they had a big impact on your life, that goes on the list. You see where the overlaps are. And if it's hard for you to tell, like there's certain things you might not know that are external environmental triggers, that might be part of the issue. I'm not trying to give a plug for my book, but at the beginning of the holistic gut prescription, there's a quiz and it's got a bunch of questions of, have you experienced this, or this? And it essentially helps you to chart your own course through the book to say, you have a likely obstacle to cure here, or here, or here, or here. And it's not absolute, but at least it gives you a sort of a place to begin to investigate and to zero in if there's something external that might need to happen. But then make sure you find somebody who can walk you through it, somebody in the functional medicine, naturopathic space who can help clarify for you where to focus, what testing needs to be done. You might not be aware of some of the functional tests that are out there because a lot of times they're not things that are covered by mainstream medicine, or mainstream insurance, I guess I should say. Having somebody help you sort through it if you've got complex chronic illness and you don't have training in this is really pretty important, I think. But I would start with that information because whoever you go to, if you have that work done already, it's way more likely that they will focus on the right thing in order to help you instead of just, going off on all these red herring um, rabbit trails that maybe are not necessarily entirely relevant.
Well, super. Thank you. That's beautiful advice. And I want you to plug your book. Let our listeners know what you're up to. I know you're recently writing a book or publishing a book.
I have written it. I am in process of trying to find a publisher at the moment for it, and it is called
Okay.
Getting to Why: Logic and Medical Decision Making. And it's essentially a lot of what we just talked about,
Hmm.
as it's something that I've noticed more and more is missing even in naturopathic training. So they've really gotten away from the philosophy. I think they were starting to get away from it even when I got there, but they've left it almost entirely behind now. And I find it really tragic, that I think is the power of our medicine. It isn't about trying to suppress symptoms with herbs. If you're going to suppress symptoms, quite frankly, the pharmaceuticals work better if that's what you're after. But the power is working with the body the way that God made it. And that's what I think needs to come back, not just to naturopathic medicine, but to all medical training.
All medicine.
That's what we're missing. Yeah. So
Beautiful. Okay. And you have two other books. Want to
thank
share
you.
about those?
Yeah. So the holistic gut prescription is the one that I just mentioned that has the quiz at the front. And that one essentially is everything we talked about, but packaged specifically for the gut. You take the same principles and apply it no matter what you're dealing with. It's just this one is focused more on here's some of the potential obstacles to cure with respect to that. The other book is How to Be Healthy Body, Mind, and Spirit, and that's just bigger picture. And there's lots of I don't know that I have this in the second one, but the first one has a lot of vignettes of patient cases that are asides of here's how this has been applied to this, this, and this kind of a thing.
Okay, super. And tell us about your practice and your podcast. And I know you have another podcast to do at the top of the hour, so we'll let you wrap up and just share about your practice in Tucson
Yeah.
and then the podcast.
Yeah. So my practice is in Tucson, Arizona. At the moment, it is myself and one other ND, Dr. Beth Livengood. And we're licensed in Arizona, and I am licensed also in Colorado. So I only see patients in those two states because that's where it's legal.
Hmm.
But we see most people physically, but we do telemed as well. So if people are further afield, then that works as also. And the podcast is Christian Natural Health. So, and it's just, I try to go back and forth on podcasts between sometimes it's focused on health only, depending on who I'm interviewing. And sometimes it's a biblical topic only. And sometimes it's a blend of the two, depending on, what the particular guest brings to the table.
Beautiful. Such a inspiring, thoughtful conversation, Lauren. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Rethink Aging, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone you love. For more episodes and highlights from the show, you can check out more videos right here and here. I also invite you to join the Rethink Aging community at caringforthebody.org, where you can find more resources on how to better protect your brain, strengthen your body, and live with purpose. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.